What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. Today we're going to go over Raging Fall Premium. And so with what this deck brings now is really supplemental help, and I'll dive into more of the pros because a lot of people have love-hate relationship with Raging Fall. So I'm going to cover how that winning image is now affected, some of the card choices, and show some key combo plays that are worth mentioning. So let's get right into it. Next Level Gaming has the new playmats already out for we have Bruce versus Bastion over here. Really amazing artwork, so I highly recommend. We also have the Vanguard Valentine's one, so if you're into like Angel Feather, for example, this would be perfect as well. And in the future coming out, we'll have something with Zorga versus Seraph Snow, so I'm excited for that one too. I'm gonna actually get that one myself too, so you can check out the affiliated link down in the description below and also get a 10% discount on your next purchase. So right off the back, what does Raging Fall actually do? It has two skills. The first skill is that you can lock one of your standing Revengers and actually give 3 of your Revengers plus 5k until the end of turn. This is not once per turn, so you can lock multiple units to get multiple plus 5ks to other units as well. The second skill, though, it is once per turn, and the cost for it can be reduced by a counterblast per lock card that you have. So at the end of the battle, this unit attack Vanguard, you can counterblast 3, discard 3, and then you can choose up to 2 of your standing Revenger rearguards, and you can choose to lock them. And then, of course, at the end of that part, if you have 2 or more locked cards, or if you're at 5 damage, you can stand this unit. So then, as we realize, we have a restanding Vanguard. It just works way differently than we thought it would actually do. Actually, we just didn't know, because at the same time, Raging Fall is a reverse unit, so the cost has to be related to locking our own rearguards in that sense too. So in theory, so you could actually do Raging Form and then write this, and then if you're at 5 damage or more, you can, in theory, counterblast 3 and then be able to restand, so you get more Vanguard attacks in that way too. The likelihood for that is low. I'll be quite frank. And I wanted to point out some of the other things that Raging Fall brings to the table. This deck is Raging Form still. Raging Form still does what it does best, right? And so when we write to that grade 3 turn, it's going to use the skill twice, so you have 3 Vanguard attacks. You're going to have to retire 6 rearguards in total, be able to go through multiple drive checks and really decked in and take advantage of that aggression and also potentially advantage gaining too. And with that being said too, you'll be able to G-guard your opponent next turn and then fall back to a potential GB3 turn, which could affect your strikes such as Chain Rankers, Guard Restriction, which goes hand in hand with the new Raging Fall. And I think this is where in Premium there are some cool avenues in that respect. So, and you still want to do Raging Form if possible, because it gives you 3 force markers, it retires a lot of regress that can give you the Ritual 3 basically at least, and then after that your strides and your other grade 3s just benefit from it. And so right after that, Raging Fall can really take advantage of that. With you ride with Raging Fall, or the next turn you ride over it, you may have a 4 force marker and then use a stride such as Chain Ranker Dragon to really make it a really good turn. So what do I mean by that is that now your stride has triple drive, right? So you'll be able to make up for the cost, the discard 3 essentially. Not only that, but if you have GB3, you have Guard Restriction. Notice that this card, the Raging Fall, does not retire cards. You lock cards, and so you can lock 2 and have 3 grade 1 or less units on board still. So you have that GB3 life, and you can apply pressure, which you could have 4 attacks in that sense with that Guard Restriction. You're demanding your opponent to put 3 more cards in that respect, so you're able to do some aggression that way. Another cool tip is really that if you start doing turns like that, you're only using 1 counterblast, so it's not using a lot of counterblasts. And if you lock 3 units, then you pay no counterblast. So you don't really need a counterblast management to like have a countercharge engine. In a sense, like I done in my prior deck profile, much more in-depth. You don't have to use as much counterblast per turn in certain matchups. You may be able to get away with 1. You have cards like Mana and Tartu that are counterblast free that can get you units to work with. What's also really cool is that those units called by Mana and Tartu, if they get locked, they lose the association between those units. So they would not get retired or bottom deck at the end of the turn. You get to keep them. That way, next turn, you can actually use a stride or another grade 3 that can actually use those rearguards to retire to get skills active. Furthermore, it's good against like disruptive matchups. So think about matches that if you're going for stride, for example, and you're going against Kagero, you're going against Narukami or Grand Blue or other decks that have cards that retire your rearguards during your battle phase, that can impact your Raging Form turns to begin with. You may not be able to do them. And this lets you lock cards ahead of time where they're not going to get rid of those locked cards. They just can't. They specifically target rearguard circles or rearguard cards in the sense. And also, you're able to do that turn. You have 2 lock cards, so you meet the condition to restand. And then your other 2 units, let's say Tartu and Mana, if you lock 3 units in the back, your front row gets plus 15k. So then your mana becomes 23k base, then your Tar2 becomes 25k. So if they deny Griffin it or Cannoneer, it doesn't hurt as bad at that point. You're still able to have a restanding turn with 6 drive checks, and if you have GB3 life, then that's great. But if you're going first stride, you may go into Force 2 and have that pressure against those clans too as a Force 2 Vanguard. And then if you get additional Force markers, then you could distribute on your front row regards as well. And your Vanguard's going to get bigger because the lock power also adds to your front row. So you're 28k plus 10k at least from the skill. And then if you have any Force markers, you can go anywhere from 48, 58, or even like 63k from a restanding Vanguard, demanding a lot of shield in that sense too. Another note, it's useful against like, you know, decks such as like Link Joker, where Link Joker would be kind of a problem with Shadow Paladin too, because we do need stuff to retire. But then with this condition, you're able to do it for free in the sense, because you have all the cards locked anyway. You just have a restanding Vanguard for free at the sense, which is pretty cool. Pairing along with the other options too, like I'm still playing just one copy of the Phantom Blaster Abyss, because I noticed that if you do Raging Form, you're decked in and you're going through a lot of drive checks. The same thing with Raging Fall as a follow-up, you make deck out, and so that's why that Legion helps with that. You can even stay at grade 3 and be able to do a restanding turn, especially if you have 2 Force markers on the Vanguard. Your Legion Vanguard is 22k base, and each Force market would give it an additional 20k. So then if you have 2 of them, that's plus 40k. Now you have a 62k Vanguard swinging twice at that point. So it has that aggression while returning cards. And of course, be wary of the Chain Ranker if you do stride, because then that's more drive checks. So you may keep in mind of the deck size. But yeah, at the end of the day, you still want to do Raging Form where it makes sense the most mass. You want to capitalize on that first grade 3 turn. After that, or specific matchups, Raging Fall can help you in that regard too. And then we're going to cover more of the specific choices for the new support as well. Onto the grade 3s. We are playing 8 grade 3s with 3 Guardian heals as well, the grade 3 ones. We are playing a Revenger heal as well, and I'll cover that once I get to that too. So just to let you know up ahead, with the Raging Forms, you still want 4 copies. Raging Form is the thing, right? You want to make sure that you're able to retire 3, re-ride, do that twice, so you have 3 Vanguard attacks to capitalize that. And of course, you have the on-play skill to call more rearguards during the battle phase to either push or make that turn actually happen in the first place too. The second thing is like Sleight Hacks over here, and Sleight Hacks helps with that consistency. I actually wanted to play 2, but there's only so much room where I try to fit in Raging Fall still. And so Sleight Hacks, at least having 1 copy is nice, because when it's placed on Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, discard a card, and then write a Raging Form from deck onto Vanguard Circle, and then bounce this card back into your hand. So you could be able to use this multiple times if you need all those Raging 4 copies to make it happen. So that's why this card is really good still. And then I'll go, of course, going into Raging Fall and the Legion. Like I said, the Legion's there for like not decking out, where Raging Fall, it's a card that, you know, 1, it's situational in those matchups, and 2, even in the matchups that aren't situational, you still want to do Raging Form first. So why not reduce the copies so that way you can see it after that? And it actually helps with that being like 2 to 3 copies. I actually played 3 at first, but I had to make room. I cut out the Legion at first, and I realized that I was running into those deck out issues as I was mentioning earlier. And reducing it to 2 has been okay, actually. And so if you don't want to play it, you can get rid of it too and make room for other stuff. But just having those 2 copies can help with that regard too. And then of course the Legion there is there just to be able to not deck out, but also have another fallback option to also do as well. The grade 3 Guardian Hills are there to help you survive, but they also count as grade 3s in hand that you can discard for stride fodder. 1, because Raging Form, you're going to use multiple copies to rewrite, especially with the grade 3 Revenger cards. It does any of them. And so more than likely, you need cards to be able to stride with 1 card, and those grade 3 heals help tremendously. Onto the grade 2s, we are playing 14 grade 2s, and with the bases we have Mana, we have Dark Blast, we have Tar2. These are the core for Raging Form to even happen. Mana and Dark Blast are both superior calling grade 1s that you may need to use abilities or just have bodies on the board. And Mana can be from anywhere, where Tar2 is limited to the hand, but also Soul Blast, so it can help you also accumulate that Soul too, with getting some key cards too. Dark Blast is essential for Raging Form to be even do the Raging Form skill twice before you have 4 damage. And in Premium is such an impactful skill to have, so you can do the turn as well. What's really cool, there's a grade 1 that helps with the consistency of Dark Blast Angel as well, and then of course you can capitalize this with other turns. If you retire, you can call another body and then take advantage of that unit to be able to attack or even just like retire. Now as you can see on the right side, we have Rukia and we have the Dark Blaster Abyss. And before I had the countercharge engine where we had Blaster, Dark Revenger, and the Doran in grade 1 to be able to countercharge, but I took that out. Like I said, with Raging Fall, I don't run into counterblast issues anymore. And with Rukia, it's a free card skill. So it has 2 skills when it's on Vanguard. When you ride a grade 3, you can actually look at the top 3 for Revenger and then add it to your hand with the same grade or less than your opponents. That gives you a +1 for free. Like, that's really nice just to have. It's a 10k body too. So if you need to ride a 10k, then that's helpful in that regard in the early game too. The second skill though is just kind of nice, but it's just passive, but it's not really used as often. It's because it gets an additional +5k is if there's a grade 1 in the same column. So if you have an 8k, this actually makes the magic number 23k too. So if you add a force marker, it makes 33k as well. It's just nice, but it's not like super impactful. But with other cards such as like Claudius that use a counterblast, you may not be able wanting to use that counterblast because at that point you starve yourself. And why not just have a card that's more V-series like, and also be just like for free in a sense. So it's just one of those things that it's nice to have, but not necessary. And that's why I only play 2. I tried with 3, but like I said, I had to make room for the Legion pair, and the Legion pair, that's the mate. You need to do it in Legion. If you can't Legion because it hits damage, or the same thing with the grade 3, it is what it is, but it's just really that safety net. Onto the grade 1s, we are playing 11 grade 1s. It's a decent number size. Yes, you would like to add more grade 1s, but cards in the grade 2 actually pretty valuable. You may be able to get away with reducing 1 Rukia for another grade 1. That's also recommended too. So with the basis, we have 4 Renault. Renault is such a great card on hit or on boost. You can check the top 3 for Revenger and add it. That's how you can actually search for the Raging Form copy. It's a lot easier. And other Revenger cards, another neat trick is that you can find the Revenger heal, add it to your hand, and then now you can start G-Guard a lot more easier too. And with the other skill too, when it's retired, you can Soul Blast 1 and your opponent chooses one of the rearguards and retires it. That's how you can start clearing their field, making it harder for them to guard on a Chain Ranker turn as well too. So they have to commit more cards to the hand to build a field or keep them in hand, but now they have that restriction too on top of that. The second card over here, Mar, is at 3 copies. This is still needed. You need a Counterblast or Revenger to search a copy of your grade 3 Vanguard, and you can search for Raging Form, which is the ideal one. And then since we play 2 Raging Falls, you can search it as well too, just to deck them and help with that regard. And it's just nice to have still, so you can still guarantee the Raging Form in your hand to do that turn. It's that consistency. And then we have Trumpeter here, where it's basically on place. You can Counterblast 1, search a grade 0 Revenger, and call it to rest. And it's nice because it puts another body on the board, but also you can call this with mana skill during the battle phase. So for example, with Raging Form, you can call grade 2, you call mana calls Trumpeter, and Trumpeter can call one of your grade 0s, whether it be a Revenger crit or the Revenger heal if need to be. So now you have 3 bodies to essentially reset your board and do another Raging Form skill on top of that. So that's how you can have 4 Vanguard attacks too, or if you really needed it to even go through the Raging Form skills that turn as well. Now this grade 1 too, it's Rakia. They're very similar. I don't know if I got them wrong, but this card, it sounds cool when you first hear it, and I'll show you why. And so the first skill is that, you know, it's in Soul. So when you have a Vanguard that's Revenger grade 3, right, you're a grade 2 Revenger. It's very specific. You can search your deck for any grade 1 Revenger and call it to rest. This is nice. It's free. And if you need to get like Mar, for example, to search a copy for your Raging Form, you have access to that just by just writing this grade 1 to begin with. And then there's other little things you can do, like building a board with Trumpeter, or maybe you want to have the Renault in that sense to just be able to retire your opponent's stuff in that sense. And the second skill is a Regard Circle skill. You can Soul Blast 2, revive a grade 2 from your drop zone, and call it to the same column as this unit. And at first I was like, well, that's kind of nice. You can revive some of your grade 2s, and then it's like, okay, what can I do? And then you realize that your main grade 2s that you go to are Mana and Tar2. Tar2 only works from hand. Mana only works to call in the same column, so then all of a sudden you can't really plus further than that. It'll replace this grade 1 on the same column, and at that point, you're just like, well, that's kind of at that point, but you decked in, and it's another way to add Ritual 1 in that sense too, because you're searching another grade 1, place it over this, and this goes into the drop if you want to do that for like more Festo turns. But the hidden gem is that you're able to reuse grade 2s that you rode with that you may need on that grade 3 Raging turn. And so a good example would be Dark Blessed Angel. If you roll the only Dark Blessed Angel up until the point you rolled grade 3 turn, you need it. So you can Soul Blast that and immediately Superior Call it in front of this guy. And that's amazing. It's like Grand Blue. As soon as you Soul Blast something, it's eligible for the drop zone revival. That's why that works. And you can, if really need to, you can use mana to get like more, for example, if you need to get a copy of the Vanguard still. So it helps that consistency if you did ride with mana during your grade 2 turn and you still need to get a body to be able to have the Raging Form. So this guy actually does a lot of consistency boost without realizing too much at a high level. It's just in practice, when you play with it, this card is actually pretty good, and it's welcome in that sense too. And it gets to use the soul that you accumulate from all the Raging Forms that you're riding with. If you haven't realized, you have a surplus of soul, but now you're able to Soul Blast 2 to revive that grade 2 that you may need at that moment, or for the future mid to late game as well, to build a decent column as well. Now into the remaining triggers, grade 0s that we have 4 PG draws. These are still helpful, especially in a meta where you have restanding Vanguards. Just being able to use 2 cards to stop an attack like that's super useful. It's a drop EG too, so when you drive check it, because you're going through 6-7 drive checks, you're more than likely to drive check these, so you can generate more advantage to help you survive the following turn too. The critical triggers, you do want to have at least like 7 or 8 of them. That way you have aggressive pressure from your Vanguard attack, so that way you could potentially crit your opponent out of the game, even if they're at 3 or 4 damage too. And you're decked ending, so you're going to see triggers during your drive checks for sure. And you have the ones that you want to stride with. Again, you're using your grade 3s to re-ride, so you need cards to be able to pitch the stride. And then the Revenger has a Revenger in the name, like I said. With the heal trigger, the same thing too, but you're able to counter charge and soul charge with the heal trigger just by binding another heal in that sense too. So it's just nice. I haven't felt like it was necessary because of the counter blast issues pretty much mitigated in a sense, but it's just nice to have another one just in case you need to superior call with like Trumpeter, for example. And also a key tip too, as a limit break for a key tip, you may want to call this if it's the only heal trigger left in your deck, so you don't heal out of 4 damage and go to 3. That could ruin your turn during the battle phase, which would suck at that point too, so it's a little key tip there. But at the same time, it's just another body that you can call with Trumpeter or even Mana, in the sense that since they specifically look for Revengers. And then we have the over trigger, and honestly the best one for Raging would be the one from Keter Sanctuary. You may have some drive checks from your rear guards, which is nice because then your rear guards are additionally more pressurable. And then if you drive check a crit, it makes it even more threatening too on top of that. Plus you generate more advantage, which helps you survive for the next turn and really set up and finish that as well. And then lastly, you have the V starter. You want to draw a card, dig deeper into your deck. If you have the Ticket Shield, really nice. You can discard it for other cards too, such as like Slight Hacks, and get copies that you actually need and stuff like that. Onto the strides, we are playing 11 strides, and so it's really nice to have Chain Ranker. You want to have 2 copies, like I mentioned. Copies your hard, so you have that flexibility as a stride now. Then you have Morfessa. Morfessa is still a very good stride in Shadow Paladin. It has the power to get crit to your whole front row. It has power gaining. It gets you that guard restriction where your opponent has to guard with 2 cards at most, or at least with 2 cards. And then you have other cards that you can fall back into, but most of the time you fall back onto these 2 strides really. So the rest of the G zone is pretty flexible. I tried 3 Raging wrapped, but it doesn't come up for me. It's just really too costly, and you're better off doing everything else. You have Dragobus Luar because it's free. You can Soul Blast, revive, not revive, wow. You can Soul Blast to call 2 cards from deck and be able to build a field with some power for every 4 grade 1s that you have. You have Drag Shredder Luar, that's just an option. You can play something else. And you have the Spectral Blaster Diablo, which is another restanding stride that you can just, if you're Raging Form hard and there's no other way for you to apply pressure, then this is something you can stride generically and still have access to a restanding Vanguard after the fact in that sense too. But really you can tweak it to whatever preference. You can even add the Phantom Blaster Diablo to have more crit pressure in that sense too, or other Shadow Paladin strides. Lastly, the G-Guards are pretty straightforward. We have the Dark Veil that Soul Blast. It gets plus 5k for every grade 1s. This will become your biggest shield later in the game, where you have the Plot Maker just be able to plus 10k generically when you have Ritual 3. So it's pretty easy to accomplish Raging Form turn. And then you have the Gillette over here. What's kind of cool is that you can, now if you use Raging Fall, you have bodies on the board, so this actually becomes more usable. So that's something to consider when G-Guarding too. So for example, after you do a Raging Form turn, let's say you G-Guarded as well. Let's also say you took a lot of damage from the prior turn. And really you stay in your Vanguard and you look like this for now. And so what you're going to do is you're going to stride into Chain Ranker Dragon. Then you're going to flip something in the G zone, copy the hard, and your GP3 live too. So now you got to build your field because the prior turn, you used all your rearguards because of Raging Form. So cards that you want to call are like, let's say Tartu behind the Vanguard, you have a mana here. And what this lets you have, let's call it over here just for example. Call the grade 1s. And like I said, Tartu can be anywhere, so that's why you put it behind the Vanguard, and then you're going to lock these two because of the skill. give your front row plus 10k if you want, or you can give the additional plus 5k to another unit here on this comp, or that one to make better numbers. It's totally up to you in that sense, but this is just an example play. And if your opponent's at 4 damage, you can actually attack with the Vanguard first to have that crit pressure. And if you have drive checks, you do triple drive, and then of course do the cost. You counter blast 1 because you only have 2, so you reduce to 1 counter blast of paying the cost, discard 3. Then you're able to restand, and then of course attack once more. You have drive checks, put them on this, and you can use cards like Renal, for example. By himself, he'll be 18k. If he didn't get any triggers and you're trying to poke in that sense, your opponent has to be in that awkward position. It's like, oh, do I let this hit because he'll get 2+? Or if they're at 5 damage, then it hits in that sense. Remember that the GB3 is still alive, so this will yield potentially 4 cards for each attack, because think about using the power that you got. You're basically 58k, and PG in it, you still have to put 2 more cards on top of that, so that's 4 cards, and so you can see 8 cards ripped out of your opponents. The only way around it would be like involving an over trigger in that sense to reduce that, but then your opponent still has to deal with these 2 other columns too. And like I said, 8 plus 8 is 16, plus the 10k boost, that makes 26. And then you got the force marker, 36, and then of course any additional triggers or anything like that, it just makes it better for you. Now let's say you're going first try. Like I said, you can go first too if you want against like a Kagero matchup in that sense. And you can use cards like Tartu and Mana, just to recall the grade once. So you have this pressure, and then you can lock all 3 if you want to. So then your front row gets plus 15, like I said, and then you can attack. This will do the triple drive, and then there's no counter blast since you have 3 lock cards. So it protects your board, such as like the Feet Flare or other cards that lock, such as Lucas Karina or the other G-Guard for Link Joker that locks stuff too. So you might as well just do that, get the benefit, and then you restand, then attack again, and then you have that pressure. Mana will be 23k base, like I mentioned, and then Tarto will be 25k base as well. And if they do Denial Griffin, they just die like that. Let's say they double Denial, but you're still able to do restanding turn, and then you unlock. And voila, you still have your units to work with for the next turn, unless they retire them or something at that point. Now to some of the closing thoughts. Like I said, like Raging Fall is more supplemental support for the existing Raging Form deck. You still want to do what it does best, and that's Raging Form skill, just in general. So I hope this was insightful in that sense too, because a lot of love-hate relationship with this card is that it wasn't that great, especially in V Premium. But in Premium, I feel like it does have some scenarios where it can kind of shine in that sense too, or help out. And then lastly, you know, just think about other card supports that you might be able to tinker at that point. You maybe want to get rid of Raging Fall, but still have the grade 2 and grade 1 to work with, and then kind of just have a build from there. So this is more of a starting template for you to try out and expand and tweak at that sense too. And if you do plan to buy cards from TCG Player, then you can use the affiliated link to support the channel. It helps a lot. Not only that, if you want to level up your gaming, you can actually check out Next Level Gaming's playmats. It's a 10% discount link at the bottom too as well to help. And then if you felt like this profile was really somewhat value for you, you know, leave a like. It helps the algorithm out to help other fellow card fighters such as yourself to see this video so they can get insightful tips. At the same time, feel free to comment down below some suggestions or some tips or even like questions that you may have for me. I love to engage with the community too, so let me know in the comments below. And if you feel free to share a fellow amigo that may like Shadow Paladin or Raging Form 2, or maybe interested in how Raging Fall can actually benefit Raging Form 2. I'm sure this will help somebody that's trying to figure things out too as well. Lastly, subscribe and hit the bell notification so that way you get instant notifications for future content to come soon. So until the next one, amigos. Bye!